We've got one more page. I think we might just finish this today of Mother's teachings on the mystery of life on her quotes here. And then we'll dig into Sri Shardi Devi and her divine play to kind of get more of her life and her character. So she says, she's talking a lot today about our relationship with the divine. And, quite often I don't know, at least in the years when you start looking at Jnana Yoga quite regularly and start doing some of the practices quite regularly, it disturbs the belief in God. It kind of makes you feel like, who am I praying to? Who's praying to who? And you ask all those kinds of questions, and which is a valid thing that happens. Thakur talks about it. He wouldn't let his bhakti devotees, he would prevent them from reading some of the more uh, popular Jnana yoga texts because it messes with their devotion. But one should always know that's only because of our misunderstanding of that approach in Jnana. That there's no God when really it's us that's disappearing. And I just want to make that a point to make, because we don't say it always, that the chosen ideal, that God manifests as that to us. He gives it a reality, just like he gives everything a reality. And so God will manifest to you as your chosen ideal, as your personal idea of him or her. And Thakur saw the manifestations of God as these deities quite regularly, quite frequently, even though he practiced Advaita all the way to the point of having to slice the Divine Mother in in half to walk past her for his jnana practice when he was studying that, and went into samadhi for six months after doing that. That was his final uh, I guess test in his jnana practice. And so I just want to say that the divine is real, that God is real, God exists and manifests to us in his forms according to our own ideal, to our highest ideal of love, in order to demonstrate that love to us. And so Mother's going to talk some about it today in our 29th teaching. She says, God is one's very own. So think of the things in your life that you consider to be your very own, that would be the things you would want to save no matter what. And God is that, at least that close to you, at least that integrated into your life and into your experience of being. It is the eternal relationship. It's a beautiful reassurance. There's no breaking that relationship. There's no end, there's no divorce in that eternal relationship with the divine. And which is a beautiful thing, because if there was someone to divorce, it would be us all the time. Because that's the trouble, that's the pain of entering into a relationship, a close relationship with the beloved, is that your partner is perfect. Your partner never makes a mistake, so any mistake that ever happens is your fault. And that's why God is always emphasizing his grace and love for us, because there's not really an easy way to navigate a relationship like that, where you are the one that's always imperfect. And so God is always inventing ways through the avatars of telling a story that reassures us and reminds us of this love, this very unnatural love. There is no love like it in the manifested world. It's an infinite love that's unconditioned. So God is your very own, and he is that love itself, and it's an eternal relationship, which is a beautiful thing. That's one of my favorite thoughts, actually, when I read that Brahmananda uh, statement where he says that spiritual life begins at Nirvikalpa Samadhi. Our highest attainment, an attainment so high that Thakur says really ordinary people can't ever reach it, that is actually considered by the greats as being the beginning of spiritual life. Because in this divine relationship, in this divine relationship that's eternal, never ending, uh, falling in love with God is an unstopping process. It never pauses, because you'll never comprehend all there is to comprehend about love. And so this relationship with the divine is really an adventure into the vast infinite of love. And so you will always fall more in love. As sweet as it can be in our experiences now, it's going to be much greater. And that will be forever true, that we will never stop climbing to a higher perspective where we see more love. We see deeper aspects of love. We learn all the different natures of love. I mean, it just goes on and on. He is everyone's own. One realizes him in proportion to the intensity of one's feeling for him. That love that you have for God ultimately is God, right? As long as we're in the lower states where we believe it's our ego self loving God, but we have to remember that universal truth, that mystical truth, actually, that God is love. And so any love that you have for your concept of God is God. And so I have this suspicion, I haven't read it anywhere yet, so take it just as a nice metaphor. But I have this suspicion that in a bhakti's relationship with the beloved, that we don't merge with our concept of God. Our concept of God is never going to be enough. It's never going to be the right concept, because it's going to be limited by our own understanding of love, our own size, small-mindedness, our inability to actually comprehend pure love. And so our concept of God is always going to be inadequate in the mind. And our sense and our knowledge of ourself is always inadequate. If it wasn't, we'd be realized, So we have two inadequate concepts in our mind all the time, that concept of God and that concept of ourself. And so in our meditations, we have this idea of God, our chosen ideal, and we have an idea of ourself. And my suspicion is that we don't merge into our concept of God, because that isn't God. That's just a paper mache thought that we've put together to conjure God. But that the love that grows between us and our concept of God is actually God. And that love is what absorbs both our inadequate concept of God and our highly ignorant concept of ourself. And so God manifests as the love between you and your chosen ideal. And that chosen ideal ever absorbs you into a greater height of love. And that means a greater manifestation of God. So here, when it says that one realizes God in proportion to the intensity of one's feeling for him, that kind of points to that, that we realize him in proportion to the intensity of our love, because the intensity of our love, that love that is the source of that intensity, is the presence of God, is the divine. And so that wonderful experience of God that you have within is exactly that. It's a direct experience of the beloved, of the divine. God cannot be realized without love. Yes, sincere love. So this is our nature. We can't do it. You can't actually do anything without love. Vivekananda says that in this universe, that love is the only motivating power. And he goes on to say that it's for love that a thief steals. It's for love that a murderer murders. It's for love of an ideal that wars happen. That love is the only motivating factor. And so not only can you not realize God without love, but you simply can't live life. You can't carry on without love. Love is what wakes us up. Love is what gets us to start our day. It's what gets us to pay our bills. It does all of those things. And so God is so central. If you follow that line of thinking, you begin to see and understand that notion that God is everywhere present in everything that's happening in the world right now, both the stuff that we've marked off as worldly things, all the stuff going on Wall Street, all the stuff going on in politics, all the stuff. If you were to look closely and study any of those, you would find a flow of love rowing through the center of all of them, motivating all of it, making it all happen. And of course, it's disguised, it's disguised because the people chasing money have to believe it's money, and the people chasing fame has to believe that it's fame, and those people, chasing pleasure have to believe that it's pleasure. So God manifests to each of us, whether we're spiritual or not, as our highest ideal. So it's God manifesting as money to the lover of money. It's God manifesting as a stimulus to the lovers of pleasure. It's God manifesting as all of these things. And our goal is to clear our vision so that we stop loving objects and recognize who it is, recognize what it is. Hey, this is love I'm chasing. Look at this. Everywhere that I've gone has been chasing after love. And so as you begin to know that, that's when realization dawns. That's when the mind purifies, right? Because it's me and mine that makes us see money and makes us see pleasure and makes us see need and want. And as we get cleaned up inside, as Mother scrubs us down, hoses us off after falling in the manure, that's how we come to know this, and that's how we become to see it. And that is always present, always the reality. Even the impossible becomes possible through devotion. Right. Even the impossible becomes possible. It doesn't depend on anything, but the things we think are impossible, immortality, becomes possible through devotion. Freedom, pure freedom, becomes possible through devotion. Desirelessness happens because of devotion. Ecstasy happens through devotion. Right. So we've seen people walk on water in the scriptures through devotion, who carry mountains through devotion. all of these impossibilities, because we live in a mind. It's only us that limits our own self. It's just like we could, anything is possible in this world. That's why the sages often talk that way. Vivekananda witnessed that. A man who could manifest roses with dewdrops on them out of thin air in India, sitting naked in a room. He was able to do that. And so these things, they're on the outer edge of our experience of faith. But those who are at the center of our faith talk about these things as normal, as not even like Vivekananda says, there's no such thing as miracles, just things we haven't figured out yet. In God's universe, anything can happen.
So Swami,
yes.
I'm just thinking aloud, and I don't know if there's any validity behind it. Thakur always says that bhakti is easier, but jnana is something where through thinking or through understanding or through negating neti or ways one can do something. But bhakti, the devotion, is something that comes from within. Yeah, one says that, yeah, you can take the name of the Lord and that'll cultivate devotion. But if you have no concept, and I know I mean, I know you ultimately go to the God within you, right? But when you think of devotion, you think of something outside as bhakti. But so unless you think of a concept of God, it's hard to foster that devotion. Am I thinking correct?
Yes, no, definitely. But that image of God is someone who has lived, someone who has a history and a story and a personality. a Jesus or a Buddha or Ramakrishna or Rama or Krishna or anything like that. But even take it, jnana practice can also point to this love. It's like there's many ways through it. There was the woman who loved her grandson so much that she couldn't think of anything
Right.
else. And Thakur said, put him on the shrine, and look. And the way that or one way of doing that practice is to look and to feel that love. Let that love really manifest in you. And then take your eyes off of the image that's reflecting that love or seemingly causing that love, and put it on the love itself.
Yes, that works. Yes.
Yeah, as the presence of God, or
right.
or thinking about your own existence. That this isness, and existence is absolute silence. It's in that existence is how we become aware of bliss, a great, beautiful bliss that's within us. And so through the contemplation of existence as an ideal of sorts,
yes, yes,
you could touch the same divine, and the same thing in the wisdom, in the beautiful sages and their teachings. So all those aspects of Satchitananda, any of them are marvelous paths for bhakti to fall into, and to wake up to that love. Because it's sort of a closed loop. If you start falling in love with love, and more love is generated, and you fall in love with that, and more love is generated and you fall in love with that, and pretty soon you're lost in it. You begin to see it plainly. You don't see people running after objects anymore. You see people running after things they love, and you see it begins to look like a party. Where everybody's running around madly looking for the things that they love with love. And little by little, we take the glasses off and realize, that we are the biggest manifestors of that love.
But right now, the party looks pretty useless.
From a perspective, it does.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday I sat and said, what a useless thing that everything was. I mean, that was the only thing I could come up with. I mean, everything I could just laugh about. It's like, it was just so amusing, the whole universe, the whole life that we live. It was like totally amusing. It was like a show. And
it is a show. And it is a show of what we don't know exactly, but it's definitely a show. There's no purpose to it. There's nothing being accomplished.
Yeah, it was like running after something or the other without anything, and anything to get or to reach. Or
what else to do?
Thank you. Seems like the dog that chases its tail.
Yes, and everybody sits and laughs, but nobody teaches the dog to stop chasing his tail.
Swamiji, you have me completely confused now.
Uh-oh.
The only thing that I am getting out of it is that love is the path. So, like, when we say to find God, then it's like somebody else. It's, we're different, separate. But what you're trying to say, which maybe not, but this is what I'm understanding, is that regardless of anything, if we focus on love we have within us for anything, whether it's outside, then gradually that love will purify and bring us to ourselves or within or God. I don't know. I'm so confused now. So I'd rather stay with my buddhi.
No. Don't be confused. You're right on. You're exactly it. Ultimately, we learn about God. So we can't be attached that was from that Vedic Christianity class. That's the thing. If you keep God outside of yourself and attached to the idea of God outside of yourself, you can get stuck in different places because of that. God will at some point, You know, that's why when a bhakti does jnana, or not jnana, does the mantra meditation, the instructions that I got, I'm assuming they're universal. I don't know. We probably shouldn't have the conversation if it's not. But the way that I was taught, I don't want to get in any more trouble than necessary. But, oh yeah, we're all sharing mantras and everything. It's great. No, we have this notion of the beloved inside. You know, we close our eyes, we picture Thakur, picture Ma, or Swamiji, or Jesus, or Buddha. And one of the instructions that was very interesting to me in my little booklet that I got on how to meditate from my guru, he told me that well, he and she told me that when I imagined Thakur sitting inside, he should be sitting and facing the same direction that I am. And I always thought that was very interesting because my natural inclination was to have, you know, God facing me. That's how it goes. But this idea of God facing the same direction I'm facing produced a wonderful teaching for me, in that God expanded, and God can only expand within me to the size of me. You know, but that was the indication, that was the point. It's that I ultimately, you know, become Thakur through surrender. You know, when I've laid down my own personality and laid down all of my own story and laid down all of my longings, when I've surrendered the last vestige of my personality and my attachment to body and mind, what is there then to separate me from Thakur? What is there then to say I'm different? You know, you can still be different. You know, I know St. John of the Cross said that he didn't believe, or I think he believed, but he wasn't able to say that he and God were one, because that's heresy in the church. But he basically said that one polishes one's soul to such a dynamic degree that it becomes an invisible piece of glass, and all that can be experienced is God. Nothing of the self or the lower self is ever experienced. And so we exist as these clean, beautiful facets of whatever that reflects love perfectly, that allows love to be viewed perfectly. So no, there's nothing to be confused about. The God is everywhere. You're going to find that if you don't exist, then, you know, if God is omnipotent, all powerful, where is your doing? If God is all knowing, where is your private world? If God is everywhere present, then where are you? You know, in this understanding, that's how we reach that state of surrender when that time comes, because you'll begin to feel that, you'll begin to recognize that in yourself, and that shift, that move, will inspire greater renunciation, will inspire a greater discernment within, as the answers to the questions get very exciting. And that intimacy, that beautiful intimacy between you and the beloved, transcends your body. That's when real bhakti starts to happen. That's when the real dance begins to happen. But it's even there now, because that love that you're feeling when you look at Thakur, Thakur's in that love. That's a direct manifestation. It's not that he's in that love. He is that love. When you feel inspired by looking at Ma, she's not the picture you're looking at. She's manifesting directly, clearly, in that sensation, in that love that's within you. And, you know, when you start thinking about that, then you start thinking, well, where is that love coming from? You know, where it's still a sensation. So it's still something I'm looking at. But what is it that produces or manifests love? You know, and that's the path of the bhakta. You know, when you start becoming intimately aware of how you are inhabited by pure love, by this God, by this beloved, and you begin to hear the poetry that he writes in your own mind, and you begin to see the poetry in the things he begins to allow you to see in the world around you, the things that you never really noticed or looked at before. And when he starts moving the furniture out of your eyes so that you can see more clearly, and you recognize someone moving, and you recognize the beloved moving in them, moving them, the heart swells. That's why Ramakrishna constantly going to ecstasy, because he would see somebody playing a flute, or he'd see somebody standing with their leg crossed, or just, it could be anything. It all took his mind to the beloved, and that's the dance of the bhakta. When God lifts the shade, puts the shade down, lifts another shade, puts that shade down, and you just live your life learning of love through a direct experience of love within you that you recognize as your beloved. And so we may try to keep God outside, and he will for a long time, until you trust enough, until you've decided that there's enough, and that you've seen enough to open the door. And then you go inside and you realize the whole shrine is within you, that the picture of Thakur you're looking at is actually within you, and that all of this has been placed there by the beloved himself in preparation for the love that's growing, in a joy of the love that's growing. Because God, nobody can giggle like a teenage girl better than God. And when he's in the heart moving your love and in expanding your heart, you know that he's just giggling, just having the time of her life, moving you toward your realization, toward that ultimate bonding, that ultimate love that is going to be ours, that is ours, even now. So don't be confused too much. Or certainly not enough not to stop laughing. Just
So one,
keep laughing. Please.
So one thing is sure, or makes sense to me, is that love springs from within. You cannot learn to love or teach love in that, because that is who we are.
Yes.
And the more we sort of, I don't even know if this is the right word to say, become loving, then the more we'll see clearer.
Yes. The more we expand our idea of ourselves, the more loving we become. And that expansion means the less we identify with the mind, which is can only think in linear thought, in time, space, causation, with cause and effect always, with the past, present, and future. When we begin to let those things pass away, then God can become larger. He can step out of time for us. He can take the blinders off. When we step out of the body, when we start to realize that we're not limited by the size and shape and age and gender, anything of our bodies, then God can shake that limitation off in his manifesting love with you and for you and of you. And you become more loving. Yes, as we take the blinders off and begin to understand our nature, that we're spirit, we're infinite. We're not limited by all of these things. We're not limited by the dream around us. The dream around us actually turns out to be inside of us. When we come to know that, what can we say? That's when the fun really is exploding everywhere around us. And that's where the relationships go. But be where you are. Enjoy the relationship that has manifested to you as you are. See God as mother in the picture or on the shrine, and feel the love. But take a moment when you're feeling that love to make it the point of your observation. Look, ask some questions about it, and maybe find Mother's face in the middle of it as it begins manifesting in you. Because to me, anyway, and this is just a personal thing, that's how I believe in God. That's how I believe in God. If I believe that God has to be directly experienced, I don't buy this notion of this man somewhere far away who gets to hide when he wants to, who gets to judge me from afar. No, I couldn't believe in that. That would be, to me, that would have so many facets of absurdity. But this notion of God as love, God as wisdom, God as existence, requires no belief at all. I don't have to believe in love. How can you not believe in love? Love is everywhere. Every song, every movie, every book, every poem, every relationship, all and only about love. It's the one most sought thing in the universe by everybody. Of course, I haven't studied even a third of planet Earth, but trust me, the whole universe is looking for love. And the same with existence. Who has to believe in existence? How can you deny your existence? This isness. And so that's God. That's the divine. That's an inexplicable thing. And I've come to focus on those things that everybody thinks they understand, but things that don't have a definition. Existence. Try and understand that. Try and figure out how to ask a question about existence. Try and figure out love. Try and come up with a definition for love, and you're going to find that you can easily violate it. It's a word that we all think we know what it means, but we won't be able to define it. Beauty is another one. You think you know beauty, start trying to define it. And you come to know that you know nothing. You'll never know anything of beauty. Beauty is infinite. So all of these things, these divine isnesses, this Satchit Ananda, any of those things, chase after them. The mind can't contain them. And to chase after any of them will lead you to the feet of the beloved. Chase love, chase wisdom, chase existence, chase immortality, chase beauty, and if you keep your eyes open, you keep yourself aware, God is present everywhere, easily experienced, which is why Vivekananda tells you, stop seeking, start seeing, because it's obvious. The only reason it isn't obvious to us is because we've stopped paying attention. We've assumed we know, and we haven't looked again. But everything that we know will evaporate under closer inspection. The closer you look, the more you understand nothing can be known in that sense, in its particular, because there is no particular. Everything requires everything, always. So even the impossible becomes possible through devotion. Disciple, how does one get love of God? Mother, the grace of God is the thing that is needful. One should pray for the grace of God. So that is what makes it available to you. And why is this grace? Because this grace is the only thing that will silence your mind. This grace is the only thing that is powerful enough to make you believe in God. This idea of grace is the only stick that you can put through the wheel of the bicycle that will stop it short. That will stop the wheel of samsara from rolling. And this ultimate grace is what undoes the final bolt, right? You can't undo your final bondage, that final piece of straw on your back. Who was there to take it off? Because if it's the final one, it's the only one keeping your sense of you. And if you reach for it and move it off your back, it falls right back into place because you disappear. There's no you there. So it's grace alone that takes that last piece off of your back. The love of God is the thing that sets you finally free, that shuts down the ego finally. when there's no doer left to do the last thing necessary. It's grace that saves, that brings us home. And that understanding the grace is our constant prayer, because understanding grace is to understand pure love. It's to understand an unconditioned love. And how can we do that except by understanding the beloved, by moving infinitely close to the beloved? You know? Yeah, so grace. Grace is the thing. That's why, you know, for the Jnani, that's what makes the Jnanic path so very, very, very difficult, is that there's not that sense of grace to do the work. There's that sense of ownership that has to be overcome. And that's why the neti, you know, because everything has to be denied. Because ultimately the denier has to be denied. You know, the ego itself has to be denied. And that's the final step. It's very difficult to do, because who has that sense of safety to let go of their sense of self, their sense of existence, their sense of particular, their sense of special? Who's willing to let go of that, and for what? You know, so that's why it's such a challenge for the bhakti, though the path and the goal are the same. Love is everywhere present. We just have to begin recognizing it. And that eternal relationship never ends, always ongoing. And so there's in that sense, there's no neti for the bhakti. It's the affirmation. Everything is God. We see God in our pets, in our plants, in our house, in our car, in our children, sometimes in a wife, sometimes in a husband. You know, it's ever expansive like that. And it leads to the same place, but you get to enjoy it on the way. You get to enjoy it on the way. But of course, there's that combination of the two, which is my favorite. Use your jnana to open your eyes. Use your jnana to open your eyes to the beloved. Start contemplating existence. Start contemplating, you know, your motivations for everything in life. Start contemplating and see God in this divine energy, whatever you're going to call her, at whatever time you're looking at her, you know. And that also you have to detach from, because sometimes God will appear as a mother, and sometimes God will appear as a dog, and sometimes God will appear as a man, and sometimes God will appear as a flower or a beautiful child, or a, you know, but always present. And I think one of my favorite things about the practice of bhakti is catching those love letters when you see them and recognizing them. You know, so you see a beautiful child being wheeled in the opposite direction. For just a moment, you get a glance of those beautiful open eyes of pure innocence. And if you think, oh, look, a baby just went by, and you keep going, you missed it. You missed it. Your beloved just looked through the purest eyes you've seen all day, and he caught your attention. It wasn't a baby. How many of those get reeled by us in a day? No, it was the beloved. Or you see somebody particularly beautiful, inexplicably so. And instead of thinking, oh, look, another perfect body or a perfect outfit or a perfect makeup job or perfect hairdo, instead of coming up with those ridiculous ideas, recognize it for a moment. You saw the beloved revealed, maybe through all of those things, but it was the beloved glancing at you, not leaving you alone, getting your attention for just a moment in the day. And if you can begin to start to recognize your desires as love letters from the beloved, you'll stop wanting the things that you thought they were. And it will be enough for you to have been reminded of the divine, of this highest soaring ideal within, the very source of your ecstasy.
Swamiji.
Yes.
So actually, I mean, may I ask something?
Of course.
So actually, I mean, it is very, I mean, as you are saying that it is easier to see God in like a beautiful flower or like, you know, your favorite pet or your beautiful child. But it is very hard to see God in like people who are hurting kids, or the people who are like doing mean things to people and like physically abusing others. And so how do you see God in those people, you know?
Yes, well, in those people you don't see God. In those times you see God in yourself, because the pain that you feel is the
Mhm.
manifestation of God. That's the pain that the beloved feels, so you look to that. Um, yeah, those are hard things, and there's not really a good answer to that, because you have to be there to see there. I until we faced the beast directly like that, I always feel like I don't really have the authority to speak about those situations, because I haven't been in a concentration camp that I know of, and feared for my life that I know of. And so I don't like to say that yes, God is there. Yes, God is there. There's no doubt God is there. And with some work, with some work, you can train yourself to see the love and the violence. It's the things that hurt other people, somebody's love of power, that will hurt somebody because they'll take power over somebody. So a person's love of that power becomes so intense they want to control somebody, and so they influence that somebody. So love is there, and it is the manifesting force even in those horrendous things. But as long as we're bodies and minds thinking that we are, there's not a way to really see that in a responsible way. So we don't look at it and try and see that as being godly or manifestation of God. What we do instead is look inside and see the pain that it inflicts on us, even though it's not us being affected. And that's where we see the love of God, in those things that manifesting within our own self. And you see God wanting to use you to alleviate that suffering, to alleviate that pain. Yeah. And so that's how the love of God manifests in those situations. When the ego breaks and our attachment to body mind breaks, then we can see the story more clearly, because we know that it's not a body being hurt, and that it's not a mind being hurt, or that it is the body and mind being hurt, and that it's not the person themselves. They're experiencing pain through attachment to those things. But that's a very high lesson, and not one that we'll learn by talking about it. That's a lesson that life brings. And you can talk to those people who are in those conditions of suffering, and learn a great deal from them. A great deal.
Yeah. For me, Swami, I think I also see where, especially, if you look at, for example, the shooters, right, who in schools, but if you actually look at what they have gone through and why that act might have compelled them to do, why they came to that, then there is compassion of sorts. And I think that compassion then leads to that empathy and that godliness, that yes, that person had to suffer so much to do that act. So that's one way I sometimes deal with it. Or even if there were big ideologies of communism or something, there was something that was supposed to be right in the beginning, and it went awry. It went the other way. It was always a right. There was always, like you said, that love, that godliness was there, but it manifested in those ways. But the compassion can still lead you there.
No, and that's as that's a teaching uniquely for spiritual seekers, in that sense. Because like you said, compassion awakens, and love awakens in that situation. And it's through that love that awakens that that person finds their redemption, finds their
Yeah.
possibility of reform.
Yeah.
It's true. And, that's a big responsibility for us. That's why I say the responsibility of a Vedantin is not to convince anybody of anything, but to sit next to them until you can see their way of thinking and understand their position, and then worship God together,
Yeah.
through that new insight. And then love is initiated at that point when that person feels that level of trust and empathy. That can open doors for their awareness of themselves that have long been shut, that allowed them to do such heinous things without any feeling or without any remorse. So
Yeah.
that
I often, sorry, I often think of the mothers of these people. Being a mother myself, I said, oh my God, oh, what suffering must the mothers and the parents have to go through to see their child in this, you know, in this act.
Yeah, I mean, in a healthy society, that's true. In an unhealthy society, the mother could be the reason.
Yeah.
It's a troublesome thing. But one has to know that love is there, and as an exercise, it's good to do that. When I first read that from Vivekananda, that love is the only motivating force in the universe, that was quite challenging for me to accept. I took a number of years to get there. And my first, I say this, and every time I talk about it, I'm always uncomfortable because it was such a weird study. But I studied Jeffrey Dahmer, because his situation was going on. And I thought, well, if love is the only manifestation, that has to be here. And so I just read whatever articles I could find about him, and pick up any information I could. And I came to a place where I sort of I saw enough to understand that it was true, and I didn't want to go any farther because I didn't want to inhabit that space. But it is true that love is the only motive. It's just also true that that can be distorted through a series of lenses so that it's utterly unrecognizable when it finally comes out of the apparatus of that mind or that body. But it is, I found it for myself to be true in that situation. I got to the point where I could see it and follow its line through that heinous crime. But it doesn't make it okay for someone like that. It's not an explanation in the sense that, oh, well, there it is. Everybody would do that if they were in that situation and everything's fine. No, that apparatus has to be dismantled. And so that can't be, it can't be allowed. It can't be, there has to be some pushback toward it for the sake of that person. That person won't be able to find their way out if they remain in the thought that they're justified in what they're doing. Right. All right.
Maharaj,
Yes.
I don't know whether this will be connected with that, but somewhere I read or heard, I do not know where, maybe YouTube, somebody was talking about a lady. I don't think he was going through near-death experience, but she calls it herself her realization. But at that time, one thing that she was saying was what she felt that she saw everything that is happening was correct, was appropriate. There was nothing not even a hair out of proportion. And completely it was balancing the good and the bad, everything where it's supposed to be. And she saw perfection in this, everything that was happening.
Yeah, that's yes. Yeah, no, that's the ultimate truth.
Yeah.
That's the ultimate truth of it. And we will see that too one day. That's what we're working toward. We're working toward God realization, but that is one of the characteristics of God realization, seeing God everywhere, always perfect. Knowing as our attachments prevent us from being able to accept a lot of that right now, because we think we're in the dream. We think the dream is real, and we think we're in it and a part of it. And so we think people are dying, we think people are being hurt, and we think that there's evil and that there's abuse, and we think all of these things. But like a dream, when you wake up in the morning, there are thousands of things could have happened in that dream that were negative, but you'll wake up and all you'll need to know is, oh, it was a dream. And then everything's forgotten. Nobody was hurt. Nothing actually happened. Nothing was really done. It was just all a mental state. And ultimately, we wake up to that much more vividly and alive than just waking up from a dream. But that notion that this world was for clowns to tumble, and the illusion of getting hurt, and the illusion of pain, and the illusion of evil, and the illusion of suffering was all necessary to make the game worth playing. Worth, that's why Vivekananda Thakur says you need those those rascals. You need rascals in life to keep the game going, to keep it interesting, to keep it playful, and for the divine, that can be the heinous things, because we can't reach those heights to understand them that easily that we can laugh at them. But if we place them within that context of a dream, then we can at least accept it's only God hurting God, if anybody's being hurt at all. But we're reassured the soul cannot be burned, it cannot be wetted, all of those things. So nothing is actually happening. It's all just a play of lights in the mind. But the reality, that which gives it substance, is God in us. That's what makes it real. That's what gives it substance. And that's why he is the only thing that we can call our own, because he is the only thing of substance. He is the substance of the substance of all things. So these are big questions, and it's good to ponder them, but not get lost in them, in that sense. But God's grace, this notion of pure love, is enough to bring us through. And it is that magical elixir that will convince us to let go of our own karma, that will convince us to forgive ourselves for our attachments to these imperfections, these wrong ideas. It's the grace of the beloved that finally is holding our hand to give us enough security to let go, without being afraid of falling. If one can regard God as one's own and call on him without seeing him, that is God's grace. Yeah, God's grace, I've learned a lot of things about it. There's still a number of things to learn about it. But one of the most beautiful things that I realized is the very fact that we can progress is God's grace. That we don't have to doubt that we have God's grace, because we can learn. We make a mistake, we feel the pain, we understand the pain, we get reflective about it, we renounce, we don't do that thing again, and we go on. That is a direct experience of grace. Without grace, you would just continually do the same thing over and over and over and over again and not find your way out. The alcoholic, the drug user who gets to that point where they, at the very end, it's grace that comes to them to break that cycle, to let them out. But without that awareness of grace, that cycle just goes and just brutally pounds you into the ground again and again and again. And then there comes a point where you stop doing that to yourself. And that's because you realize something inside not everybody realizes the same thing, but you touch something that makes you wake up and say, why am I doing this every night of the week when this has ruined everything for me? And at some point, that ruination becomes enough to get your attention. And that's grace. That's grace. Why didn't it come earlier? You weren't asking for it earlier. You thought you had your thing and you were going after it. But there will come a point where we call out for grace, and it will come in abundance. As the mother says, if one can regard God as one's own and call on him without seeing him, that is God's grace. He who will pray to God eagerly will see him. If one calls upon him repeatedly, he becomes compassionate, and so a devoted attachment comes into being. This love, for love's sake, should be hidden from all eyes. Yeah. Because that's a very pure form, a very pure substance, love for love's sake. It's a wonderful internal, I mean, it manifests interiorly, it's just that wonderful warmth, that wonderful divine. And the reason it has to be so guarded, this comes from Swami Prabhupada, because I was asking him one time, how come we're discouraged from talking about experiences that we have or dreams that we have, or why is it that we're always told to keep those inside, keep them secret? And Swami Prabhupada said to me, he said, see, that energy that is produced, that's left behind by those experiences, is very pure and can be used to take you great distances in your spiritual realization. He says, but those things can also be misused. He says, you can use a great dream or a great experience to build ego. And then you've taken a precious substance and wasted it on building ego. He says, and so to safeguard such a tragic mistake, the sages teach us to keep them private, keep them inside, so that you don't waste a beautiful experience by making yourself proud of it, by building an ego around it, and making that great mistake of thinking that you're something in the wrong way like that. It's like, and I learned from that also, that this divine energy within, when I'm going to be a little bit rustic here, forgive me, but when someone says they're horny, that they're wanting lust, they're not. They're feeling that divine energy within, and what that has always indicated for them is lust or pleasure or connection with some other human being. And so they've begun to associate that internal energy with that act. And so that's what it means to them. And so they describe it that way. But that same energy that makes a man or woman feel that way, when that energy is held within and recognized as that life energy, that self, the manifesting energy of love within us, that's why you hold the lower gates and bring it up higher and bring it higher. You attach it to higher and higher ideals so that you understand these energies that I'm feeling. They're not longing to go out to dinner. They're not longing for more friends. They're not wanting more drugs. They're not wanting, more sex in my life. They're not wanting more beauty. What these things are wanting is what I am. And that what I am is stored within me. And so I close the gates to all those external things, and that well of love rises and rises and rises until it comes into our awareness. And at that point, it's realization. We come to know that we are that. We are that beautiful love that we had used for all of the selfish things in our life. And we renounce one final grand renunciation of that pesky ego, and we're free, holding the hands of grace and jumping once and for all into nothingness, into everythingness, into infinity. Oh gosh, 7:06, we didn't make it. We still we still have almost as much to read as we did before we started. But yes, we had some treasures though tonight. For sure. The biggest one, your beloved is everywhere present and always perfect. Just start seeing it that way and accept those love letters for what they are. Keep your eye open for them. That's even better. Start looking for them, and then you're really moving. Start looking for them. Yeah.
Mm.
All right. Any more questions? Anything else to say or add or challenge or correct or? All right.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Thank you.
Best
Thank you,
indeed.
Swami. Yeah.
Swamiji.
Be
Thank you,
well.
Maharaj. Mhm.
Jai Ma. Jai
Jai Ma'am.